Good afternoon and welcome to today's session, it's Leaders Live Q&A session. Really delighted to say we've been joined by some colleagues both internally in the council and also from our police partners. This is a slightly different session than we normally run, and what we've been asking for is more opportunity to do some deep dive sessions, some focus sessions, and the feedback we've had was be really great, really useful to do that with our in terms of ASB, so antisocial behaviour, and what we're doing about that as a council, what our partners are. So before I kick into this session, it'd be really, we think it's a really useful way of doing it going forward. So any other ideas people have got, any other people you'd like to bring into these conversations, fantastic, please do. We're going to extend the time that we normally do, so we're going to try and run this to 1:45 today, because we really would love to get as many questions in from people as possible. Okay, so in a minute I'm going to introduce our Police and Crime Commissioner, David Sidwick, to a brief introduction. We're not going to go for introductions from everybody on the call today, because we want to make the absolute most of the 45 minutes we've got. But I'll just say we've got Dave Sidwick, Police and Crime Commissioner. We've got my portfolio holder for community safety, which is Councillor May Haines. We've got Kelly Ansell, who's for communities at BCP, and we're really privileged to have Superintendent Gemma Morris here, who's a part of the Neighbourhood policing teams, and also Inspector Dan Cullen and Sergeant Mark Philpott. So any questions you've got, we should be in a good place to answer them. So please fire away. Okay, Dave, perhaps I could come to you. I believe you're recently in post. I think it was May. Perhaps you could just explain a little bit about the PCC role and antisocial behaviour as a priority for you, I believe. Dave.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Drew. And good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Drew, for inviting me along to this meeting. So I was elected on May the 6th. And one of the issues which triggered me actually running for the job was antisocial behaviour. I saw it basically occurring across our area. And what I did for 3 years was talk to people about what was required. And very clearly, it was something which was high on their priority. A survey I did found that antisocial behaviour was the number one thing in the BCP area. So having been elected on May the 6th, it is basically top of the things to do list. I have 6 priorities. The first one is to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour. In the first 100 days, what we did was I discussed this with the police. And they basically took it on as a priority as well and launched something called Operation Relentless, which ties everything together and is their response to ASB. And that will continue going forward. The other piece I did was an Operation Relentless Community Fund, which community groups and charities can apply for. And it is grants between £100 and £5,000 to directly affect ASB. So that's the start. A police and crime plan is normally developed across a year when a new police and crime commissioner comes in. We'll have ours done by October. So I hope that makes sense. So I think I'm going to leave it there because it is really clear to me that it is about the questions from the people. That is what the PCC's job is to represent the people. So we'll look at those.
Yeah, great, David. Thank you ever so much for that. And we're starting to get some questions in now, so I'll move to those. So this is a partnership approach. We as a council have been absolutely committed to antisocial behaviour, being improved. We put in over a 300% increase in funding into CSAS officers, all as part of our remit about delivering pride in play. So we've got a police and crime commissioner who's dedicated to this, the council who's raising the profile of it as well. Really good time to go to the first question actually from Keith Falp, talking about exactly that. How do we ensure ASB doesn't fall between the cracks of both organisations? Perhaps I could come to Councillor Haines May to lead off on that. May.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. And I thank Mr. Phelps for his question. It's a good question. We basically, as Councillor Mellor has actually indicated, we work in close partnership with the police the homeless people, the homeless agency, and also other directorates within the council. So in answer to that question, because we have a partnership approach, multi-agency approach, if something is reported, but it involves more than just ASB or the police, because we have this multi-agency approach, it is actually covered. So I think from that point of view, I'm quite confident that actually when a case comes before us, and it may be quite complex, involving various different departments within the council and also outside organisations, because we have this partnership approach, we would, I would say in most cases, actually not have anything fall through the cracks. But it's not to say it's an absolutely perfect system, but we work in such a way that that is actually something that is unlikely to happen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, May. David Sidwick, partnership question. Would you like to give your response as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the things which is absolutely critical to get right, which is why we've got a new monthly meeting between myself, Drew, and May and Kelly, which occurs now, which didn't occur with the previous administration in the same way, to discuss issues around BCP, and obviously ASB is high on that agenda. So every month we'll look at what's happened, what we need to do, what else we can do. That's at the high level. There are also touch points, down through the police and the officers, and I don't know if Gemma wants to mention that at all.
Yeah, very, very happy to, and I believe we've got Kelly Ansell's coming as well. So perhaps go to Kelly first.
Thank you, Drew. I wanted to just build on what May was saying in terms of that partnership approach. It's very much something that is at the heart of our response to antisocial behaviour, be that from the way we coordinate our resources and our boots on the ground, if you like, with the police and other agencies as well, or in terms of what is often quite complex case management. So we work across the council, but with the police and other partners. So, for example, a housing provider might be involved in a situation that we would look to work very closely with. But also just to give reassurance that there is a strategic approach that's taken to this from our community safety partnership, and the antisocial behaviour and tackling antisocial behaviour is one of the priorities for that partnership, and something that we're working really carefully to devise a way of kind of working better with our communities on, in terms of community engagement and how we can have a conversation. The final point that I just wanted to make was about evidence-based. So evidence-based approach is absolutely critical to how we prioritise our resources, and from a strategic perspective, but also operationally and tactically in terms of how we deal with dynamically with the issues that might be being faced in our communities. We use evidence on it's absolutely key to that. So we do use evidence as a partnership, working on a multi-agency basis to plot our hotspot areas and to proactively manage and prevent ASB demand as well.
Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, let's get to some of the more detailed questions. We've got a specific one to Councillor Haines from Steve Tellamy, and then we've got something on CCTV. So perhaps we can have Steve's question up, and Councillor Haines, May, can you come back on that one, please?
Yes, certainly. Thank Mr. Tellamy for his question. Yes, we have had a conversation about this, or rather email exchanges about this. The phone number that Mr. Tellamy is actually referring to does appear, but it appears on the Bournemouth page as opposed to the Poole page. So it is actually already there, but we are also currently working on our council website. So when this piece of work is actually done, all the numbers, the appropriate numbers to actually call, will actually appear. So I don't know whether, Drew, you are able to perhaps give an indication of when that would be, but it's just to say that that number does appear. But when you go to our reported page, if you click on the Bournemouth page, because that was the legacy Bournemouth phone number, but if you wanted to call the out of hours number for Poole, the one that does appear is actually 0800 50 60 50, which will actually then get referred to our out of hours noise service as well.
Yeah, thanks, May. We've got a massive commitment to improving customer services across the council. I think there's some real challenge in and around COVID and different people working in different places. So we're bringing forward a large, website project at the moment. But by all means, we certainly look forward to getting some of those numbers in. Perhaps what I'll do is I'll go to just as a quick note, I'm going to prioritise the antisocial behaviour questions. Thank you for some of the ones around ETROs. We're listening to them. We're back again next week with a more normal session. If we get time at the end, I'll personally come back in on some of them, but we're going to prioritise the ASB ones. Okay, so could I go to Dave Sidwick about the Jordan Stanrack question, and I'll come back to May after on the CCTV. Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan, thank you. That is a really good question. I mean, the issue is that we have two parts to police funding. We have the part which is raised through what they call the precept, which is the piece on the council tax. And we have the part which is given to us by the central government grant. With that, basically, we fund the police. Now, every police force in the country has those two parts to it. Something I'm not happy about, and I'll be blunt on it, is the proportion. So that's one thing, and I am lobbying heavily that the national funding formula is changed so that it reflects better the amount that Dorset should get. But there is another piece to that, and the piece is around the precept. What we have to be very clear is what that's for. So what I will be doing is, if and when that's required, I will be showing you what you get for your money. And you need to see that, and it needs to be clearer than it's been in the past. Now, it's your other part of the question is, it's police's job to stop ASB. Well, it's all of our partners' job to stop ASB. ASB is a broad church, unfortunately. It's everything from noise, graffiti, to the things which I believe the police should be dealing with, which is ASB, where it strays into to issues of vandalism, criminal damage, assault, those sorts of things. So my answer to that is it's all our job. And the point is this, is we'll make certain every penny counts for Dorset, however we get it. Thank you.
Yeah, and let me just endorse that as well. In terms of being all our jobs, what we're doing now, and I hope you visited today is a good evidence of it, is absolute partnership working. ASB is a priority for our council. It's a priority for the Police and Crime Commissioner, but we're not shirking it. We're going to do it together, and we need to do it together. So we're both stand up in that space. I've got a really good question from Susan Lennon about CCTV. May, perhaps you could start us off on that one. Some interesting developments in CCTV and extra investment recently.
Yes, certainly. And I thank Susan for that question. It's a good question. In answer to the first part of your question, yes, we have actually changed our hours of cover for the service, and I'm very pleased to say we now do monitor 24/7 on CCTV. We have a main control centre that's in Madeira Road, and it is monitored 24/7. And then on the other part of your question about better lighting, and particularly in the suburb areas, we have also just started, or we will have going to our cabinet meeting next week, a Cleaner, Greener, Safer campaign paper. Now, this had a soft launch back in December, and part of that is we're encouraging people to actually let us know where they feel lighting doesn't exist and need to be put in, or lighting is there and it needs to be improved. So just the very points that you've actually raised. And also the other thing is to actually let us know where there's existing lighting, but there's overhanging vegetation that is obscuring the light so that it's not actually illuminating properly. All these things, if you let us know, we will actually look into them, and where possible, actually put an action plan in place for that. So I think we have also got how we can report these things that which actually appear on the screen. So I really thank you, Susan, for raising those points, because they're very, very important, and they will actually help improve safety in areas, but also the feeling for local residents of feeling safer. So thank you for raising those points.
Brilliant, thank you. And yeah, we were really proud to take that paper through, May, weren't we? You know, £3.8 million of extra investment in clean and green and safe, well over a 300% increase in our contribution to CSAF officers as well. Okay, great. We're going to go. Alex Williamson's asked a question now, which we're going to go to Kelly for. Kelly.
Thanks, Drew, and thanks, Alex. Just to say, I'm not aware of the circumstances that you note there in terms of resistance, but certainly adverse childhood experiences and trauma-informed practices is something that we hold very important and as a priority in terms of how we deal with not just antisocial behaviour, but lots of issues around, for example, child exploitation and many other community safety issues. Certainly in terms of our street-based begging and rough sleeping issues, we do take an approach of trauma-informed practice there. So what I was going to suggest, Alex, is if there's any specific, because one of my other areas is around supporting the voluntary and community sector in terms of my scope. So if you did want to get in touch to talk about any specifics there, then it's bcpcouncil.gov.uk.
Yeah, and we'll get that email address put up online as well, and now so people can take it. So I'm sure one of our colleagues will put that up. Okay, got a general question from Emma McGee around eating in BH1 on Saturday around 5 o'clock. Emma, quoting, horrified and intimidated by mobs of teens running, fighting, arguing, etc. This is massively what we're talking about, isn't it? It's what is perceived as antisocial behaviour in our town centres. Who would like to? I think we've all got strands we're working on. We're putting forward a number of extra community safety officers. Anybody want to come forward? It's a general question about Central Bournemouth, antisocial behaviour, Lower Gardens. I'll go to May first. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Drew. Again, another good question. So I thank Emma for raising that point. We do hear about antisocial behaviour and various what is perceived to be undesirable behaviour happening in our town centre. Quite a lot of this is actually posted either on Twitter or more frequently on Facebook community groups, which is a great way of actually communicating within your community. But when one of our residents, such as Emma, if you witness something which you are very concerned about, I would really encourage that this actually be reported directly to the council. So we have an ASB team at bcpcouncil.gov.uk email address where such behaviours or such concerns can actually be referred to. And I know you are also talking about the gardens, but I will actually leave that to Mr. Sidwick to deal with, because there are also police operations that are happening in the lower gardens. But I think the message is that if any resident were to witness issues that they feel are antisocial related, doesn't matter whether you feel maybe it's not, maybe it isn't, I would please encourage you to actually report it to us. So if you report it through the official channels, it will be logged and it will be dealt with and action will be taken as appropriate.
Great. Anybody else would like to comment on that? Is that Dave putting your hand up? Yeah, great. Dave.
So yes, Emma, and thank you very much for that question. There are operations which occur. There is one called Operation Fireglow, which is deliberately targeted at the lower gardens and our young people in order to make certain that we actually address those sorts of issues. We obviously need to do more. And something which will change is the number of police officers. You will have heard about the 20,000 new police officers across the country. Well, the first tranche of those are coming this October. And I'm not going to go into operational specifics because that would be wrong of me. But what I can tell you is that I've been very clear that the majority of them need to go into our neighbourhood policing teams. So into the very areas which will be address the issue that you're talking about there. So I hope that helps to some degree. I don't know if we can get Gemma back in, because of course that will also help with Oakdale and Poole bus station.
Yeah, great. I think just Gemma is temporarily not online. I can't see her online. So what we leave is the Oakdale Community Centre and the Poole bus station questions, and hopefully we'll get we'll get Gemma back online. Okay, let me look at some of the...
I can add something. I've just got a
Please do,
message
Dave.
from them, even though they're not online, in that there are now extra patrols occurring in the gardens and around the toilets and BH1, basically. So it's beginning to cut through, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so I'll come to bring Gemma back in as and when she's in. May, perhaps I could come to you. I've got a question from Louise Collins on reference Poole bus station, and then Terry Burton on fly tipping. Probably both for best for you to start with. May.
Yes, thank you very much, Drew. So on Poole bus station, we had a consultation recently to ask whether the cut through, which is from the back of the bus station through to the actual bus station, that has currently temporarily been blocked off. And the reason for that was because when we have antisocial activity happening, some of the perpetrators, if I can refer to them as that, do then use that as an escape route. So therefore, it is actually making it more difficult for them to then run off if they need to be apprehended, depending on the situation. So that consultation has actually now closed as to whether it should be permanently closed, and I'm waiting to actually see what the response has been for that. But then on another note, regarding the Poole bus station, there's also been complaints about a seating area by the underpass, where again it's been reported quite significantly that people use that to actually sit there, and then they cause distress to people walking past, etc., etc. My understanding is that that bench will actually now be removed, and so therefore it will now no longer be a place where people can then just hang around and cause distressing or call out to people and cause distress to people who happen to be walking past. So I don't know, Drew, whether you want me to go on to the fly tipping from Mr. Burton, Terry Burton, or I don't know if
Please do, May. Please, if you come in on the fly tipping question, and then
so
we'll
the fly tipping. So I thank Terry for that question. It's just to say that we have now finally launched a fly tipping pilot. We are working in partnership with an external company, and how it would work is that if there is fly tipping that occurs, and there is a possibility that it could actually be traced back to the originator, i.e. whoever actually put that rubbish there, this company, external company, will actually then carry out the investigation and trace back to who has actually done the fly tip. And then, if it's appropriate, they will actually be issued with a fine or a fixed penalty notice, because, as we all know, fly tipping is actually considered an environmental crime and it's criminal in nature. So therefore, if we have sufficient evidence, we can actually issue a fixed penalty notice towards them. So that pilot started about 3 weeks ago, and so far the company that we're using, Wise, they've actually been very, very active out and about. And I'm sorry that your particular incident hasn't actually been picked up, but I will flag that with the fly tipping team to make sure that that's actually dealt with.
Great, May. Thank you ever so much there. So we've got a question from Gary Livemore, and Dave, I think probably appropriate for you to pick that one up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for the question, Gary. So there's 4 things we need in order to address the drug dealing that we have. One is we need to be tough on the drug dealers. And let me pick up on the point that you make about undercover officers. So last week, I was at a meeting where I actually raised that about why can we not have more undercover operations in Dorset. So I will keep pushing on that, and I hope to obviously bring that to fruition. But of course, we won't know. Let me pick up on it though in a different way as well. We need to be. Those 4 things are: we need to be tough on drug dealing. We need to call it out. We need to have the police enforcing, particularly on the dealers, to break the county lines. And we need other things as well. We need effective rehabilitation, not rehabilitation which is a tick box. We need something which actually works. And I've taken a national portfolio in order to try and address that, called the Addictions and Substance Misuse Portfolio. And one of the first things we're going to be looking at is mapping effective rehabilitation across the country, so we get more of what works and less of what doesn't work. But we've also got to try and cut the demand, which is about having more impactful education for our young people. At the moment, and I won't prolong this, but at the moment we have something which tends to be too mechanistic. We need to talk to them about the risk. We need to tell them of the risk of cannabis. We need to tell them the risk of MDMA. We need to address that. I had a friend's daughter die on the O2 Arena's floor 2 years ago from MDMA. I'm very passionate that we get this right. But also we as a community have to say, we don't want drugs here. You know, this isn't what we want for Bournemouth.
Absolutely, Dave. Thank you. And it's probably worth just, you touched on there about your national profile. So it's fair to say that the PCC has a very direct line in to, you know, the most senior politicians, you know, the Home Secretary, Prime Minister. So, you know, it's a really important role in that whole national framework.
You're absolutely right, Drew. This Friday, I'm co-chairing a meeting with the Policing Minister and other PCCs across the country in order to talk about what we're going to do about drugs at a national level. And that will filter down to Dorset.
Brilliant. Okay, I believe we've got Gemma back. Actually, no, I'm just seeing that stall now. So I was going to come to Gemma on the Poole bus station and Oakdale question. What we'll do, we'll go to Kelly. Kelly, could you perhaps answer Tony Engelman's question around begging effectively and the Vagrancy Act? So Kelly, is that probably an appropriate one for you to pick up?
Yeah, I can pick that up, Drew. Thank you. I think it's important to say that we need creative solutions and certainly options that are available to us that are much more up to date than the Vagrancy Act of 1824. That is something that we've considered. But in terms of balancing the approach that we take to the issue of begging and rough sleeping, you know, it really is about making sure that we are proactively engaging with those individuals who often come with very complex needs and difficulties that we have to work through with them. So we take very much a partnership approach to that, and there is a balance to be had in terms of enforcement and engagement and support in that. Our approach really does rely on working with our outreach services, but also as Drew and May have mentioned, our CSAS team. So we have a number of community safety accredited officers who work in my team and do a fantastic job of working out there in the community to deal with those issues when they see them, work with partners to address them, and to make sure that we create that truly balanced approach. We've had an operation jointly with the police taking place in Bournemouth Town Centre for some time now, called Operation Luscombe, and that has been really successful in terms of taking appropriate action and proportionate and balanced action where we need to, in terms of dealing with those individuals who are persistently begging. And our figures at the moment look like in the last year we've had the result of taking 30 people and supporting them out of that pattern and that lifestyle. So there are a number of different measures that work, and that is something that happens on a daily basis out there in our town centres.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. That's really helpful. And you know, just some of the things we've managed to do in the last 6 months. You know, with contactless giving, the investment in the health hub we're doing, which is directly targeted at homelessness people. But then, you know, that's the less professional begging element of this problem. So we are really trying to, you know, stand up some things in and around the town centre. We're implementing lockers, you know, which to remove, you know, some of the artifacts, you know, and safe spaces from people who are, you know, genuinely homeless. So we're committed to trying to make a real difference in this agenda. Okay, I'm going to come to let's have a question on slightly different tangent. Kerry Brooke Manning, question about sort of youth effectively. Perhaps that's one for May and I to both come up. May, do you want to go first on that? Kerry Brooke's youth offer question.
Yes, thank you, Drew, and thank you, Kerry, for raising the very important issue about youth provision. So you talk about youth centres. So what we have actually done is, as part of our seasonal response, we had actually provided 300 extra hours of youth engagement, particularly in what we feel were hotspot areas during the summer where the youth would tend to congregate. And then sometimes, because I don't know whether it's boredom or whether there's a lack of things to do, unintended consequences can then happen. But what we've also done is we're very conscious that we need to have good provision for our youth. So we have actually invested in a youth engagement officer. So that's another thing that we're doing. And we also, as part of our communities remit, we work very closely with our colleagues in children's services to make sure that we actually do have provision for the youth. And particularly, we want to look at preventative measures, particularly if some of them may have complex issues, they may have issues within the family, and we want to work very closely with these families and also with the youth to try and mitigate against them actually then turning to crime, or as the PCC has said, perhaps far worse, drug-related activities, etc., etc. So it's a cause that's actually very dear to our hearts, and we are actually putting a lot of effort in to making sure that we can mitigate against any such events happening.
Yeah, thank you very much, May. And from my perspective, talking a bit more generally, so we've got a big plan about making BCP Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole world-class, city region. The heart of that is people, culture, community, and children. So in terms of the whole, the offer for the child and being an engaging place to be, we're now trying to bring forward some investment through our Futures Fund, which is a £50 million infrastructure fund that we've put forward to hopefully, and one of the strands we're looking to do is to, work out how we can best use that infrastructure to improve youth services as well. So totally get that that's part of the problem, needs a direct solution from us. We're working on it and we're going to get there. Okay, Dave, I believe a couple of our officers are having, police officers having issues with the signal, technical. Perhaps I could come to you and ask you to do a bit of a wash up on some of the wider ASB questions that we were saving until they came back on. Is that okay, Dave?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I mean, it must be very frustrating to be sitting there and not being able to answer the questions. So I've got some communication from them. So if I pick up, there was a question around Poole bus station. So Poole bus station is very much a priority. I myself went to see it in the first month of office in order to basically understand what was going on there. There is a multi-agency problem-solving group around Poole bus station, which Kelly will be very aware of. It includes the police, council ASB team, businesses, bus company, and CSAS. And they've identified key persons causing the issues. And now what they're doing is utilising civil orders, criminal prosecutions, as well as engaging with families concerned to support them and to prevent future occurrences. So it's very much, it very much will be a work in progress, but they're very much on it. So that's Poole bus station. If we quickly pick up on Operation Luscombe, they agree with exactly what Kelly said. They are signposting to other services and then moving to enforcement through warning letters, use of legislation, etc. And the last one I'll pick up on was the undercover police officers, which is part of the full range of tactics which they're employing, though obviously, we aren't going to say where those undercover officers will be operating, if that makes sense. So I hope that's a little bit of a wash up to catch up. And obviously what we'll do is we'll make certain anything we don't catch in this manner, we'll get an answer out to the public.
Yeah, great. And I should say as well, actually, so we've got our team going now to answer some of the questions that are being answered up there. But we will commit to getting responses to people going forward. And thanks for your support in that, Dave. Okay, so what I'll do now, we've got I think it'd be worth saying it's really timely because of the paper we took through on Monday around graffiti and some of the challenges and some of the things we're doing. And I believe Gary Livermore's talking about the shared path behind the tennis courts in the middle garden. So May, perhaps that's a good one for you to take on.
Yes, indeed it is. So with graffiti, if it's on public land or publicly owned property, then the council will actually go and clean it. If it's reported to community.enforcement@bcpcouncil.gov.uk, and then it will be picked up. However, if the graffiti is actually on private land or private property, unless it is considered to be of an offensive nature, the council will then therefore not actually be able to remove it because it is private property, and we will work with the owners of the relevant properties on a solution forward. The responsibility for removing graffiti on private property really does reside with the property owner. But as I said, if it's an offensive nature, then we will actually work with the property owner to actually get that removed. So I will pass, again, that will actually be passed on for our graffiti team to actually look into. And if it is indeed land that is a responsibility of the council, then we will have that removed.
That's great, and we really appreciate the action you bring in this area, May. Thank you. Okay, going to come to Kelly now and talk about, it's a Susan Lennon question. It's a bit around community engagement, Kelly. Perhaps if you could try and unpack that for us, that'd be great.
Thanks, Drew, and thanks, Susan. Completely agree. Community engagement is absolutely key to not just dealing with drug and antisocial behaviour issues, but a number of different things that we see happening across our communities, and that's an absolute commitment for BCP Council. We're taking a community engagement strategy to our cabinet at the end of this month, and really pursuing a strengths-based approach to how we really work with our communities about those issues. It's also a priority for the Community Safety Partnership. So that's the statutory partnership that is responsible for management and delivery of a response to crime and disorder issues across BCP. So the police, the council, probation, many other agencies, health, are all involved in that at a strategic level. And one of the priorities that we have agreed recently is to ensure that we do have that neighbourhood focus and a focus on community engagement. So expect to hear more and to see more in terms of us coming out and talking to communities about the issues and exploring and unpacking that, but also then taking that strengths-based approach to how we work together on the solutions. That's absolutely critical to how we deal with a plethora of different issues.
Brilliant, Kelly. Thank you very much for that. And again, I've said it before, but I hope today's a good example of that. We really are trying to work across across agencies and much closer than perhaps set points we've been able to before. That isn't just a few agencies such as council and the police. We're through our strengths-based, asset-based community development approach, we're now trying to really put more energy and support in and behind the wider community's agenda. And a few people have mentioned it specifically around youth, but it's the whole piece, isn't it? Really engaged community, really active work there is it absolutely improves ASB, improves people's life chances and makes people feel more engaged. So we're committed to that. Dave, what I might do is we've only got a few minutes left, and I wanted to give you sort of the opportunity to perhaps talk a little bit again about the key priorities, maybe what's coming up next. What's in your 100-day plan, effectively. So I didn't want to miss the opportunity to hear from you more directly. So perhaps we could have that, and then we'll see if we can mop up some questions. Dave.
Well, thank you very much, Drew. I mean, I talked about the first priority to cut crime and antisocial behaviour earlier, but I think the last question actually about community engagement is absolutely core to the second priority. The second priority, wherever I went across Dorset, people said they didn't feel quite so connected with their police force as they should do. So what we're going to be changing that, and we're going to be looking at how to connect better, how to have stronger community engagement. And you'll see, you'll have seen that now we have neighbourhood engagement contracts, which are refreshed every few months. And so we're going to be driving that forward. So we're going to have more officers in the neighbourhood policing teams. They should be better connected to the public, and that should allow us in order to address some of these issues which we've been talking about today. So that's the second priority. The third one, very clearly, was to address the violence and the criminality around that in our communities. So although we're a very safe place in Dorset, you know, our murders are between 2 and 16 on a bad year. And our knife offences are of the order of about 300 compared to London, which is 14,000. It's a very safe place, but we want to keep it that way. So I'm very keen that we address the issue around drugs. And as I spoke earlier, that's a multifactorial issue which we need to address. But I also want to attack the hidden harms, the things like child abuse, the things like domestic abuse, things which are driven in our society, but behind closed doors, and make certain that we get on top of those. So that's number 3. Number 4 is kind of less obvious for BCP, and that's fighting rural crime. But let's be clear, organised crime groups don't differentiate between the rural side of the county or the urban side of the county. And it's primarily those that I want to target in order to drop rural crime, and that will also help in the urban area. Number 5 is about putting victims and communities first. I'm very clear that we have to make certain that we support our victims. And what I've done is check that our victim support also covers antisocial behaviour now. Because if you have that as a grind, and you've had possibly months or years of it, then you probably do need some victim support. And that's what we're working on. But there's something else there as well, which is if we truly are going to get that piece right, then we've got to look at the different communities we've got and treat them like as a priority. So for the elderly, I want to make certain that we have that piece right around protecting them from fraud, for example. With the young, I've got this thing I talk about, which is called Fix the Future. We don't have enough early intervention. We don't start early enough. And that's not just in BCP, that's as a country we don't start early enough. If I'm told that 9-year-olds are acting out drug behaviours in playgrounds, then we've got to start talking properly to primary schools and our very young residents in order to try and help them stay on a good path of life for the future. And then the last one was one I did refer to earlier, which is making certain that every penny counts for Dorset. It's not just about what happens in the future. It's making certain that every penny that we have goes to those areas of the police force which can make a difference. And when I put all that together, then I guess it's aiming to make Dorset the safest county in the UK, but I can't get there on my own. This is truly about partnership working. And the fact that we've done this today and the fact that we have our regular meetings, I think is a new and very, very healthy way forward. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, great, and thank you for committing to those. So David and I, May, Kelly, and the chief exec meet monthly. So that whole partnership piece is really strong. I'm going to come to a quick question, sort of a comment generally around early intervention. Then I'll ask May from the council side to perhaps sum up as well. There's a few comments from Alex Williamson and I guess Kerry Brooke Manning in and around early intervention. Alex is stating there he's got an email from me saying that council can't afford to invest in early intervention. Alex, perhaps we could have a conversation about that, because that's absolutely not anything I have any recollection of. If we put my email address up now, that'd be great. So drew.mellor@bcpcouncil.gov.uk. What we've actually done as an administration since we came in, we put our budget through last in February. There's £13.5 million invested into vulnerable adults, £7.5 million million pounds, into children's services. And on top of that, directly about early intervention, we put £1 million as a COVID catch-up, effectively. That is directly targeted as our family's investment fund. So that is money being spent now to deal with the impacts of COVID, and it absolutely is an early intervention piece. Personally, I'm a chair of, and I was part of founding a children's mental health and movement charity. Absolutely, at a population level, all about early intervention. So we're committed, and you'll see on a number of different levels, this council is committed to, absolutely delivering the budgets it needs in terms of this agenda, in terms of the children's agenda, with proving it in terms of antisocial behaviour, and the £3.8 million that we announced this week of extra resources in and around all of that Pride, Cleaner, Green and Safer agenda. But Alex, I do welcome your a dialogue with that, because if that's the impression you've got, we need to speak about it. So drew.mellor@bcpcouncil.gov.uk. Appreciate we're just running out of time now. So May, perhaps I could come to you from the council side to perhaps sum up from your perspective, and then we might look to close. Thanks, May.
Yes, thank you very much. And I thank everyone that's actually submitted questions today. Some very, very good questions that have been submitted. And I think as a closing remark, what I would say is that our council perspective is that we put the victim at the heart of our council's approach. So the victim support is very important to us. So if someone has actually experienced or has suffered as a result of ASB, then that person will actually be given council support to actually deal with what they have actually faced. But I would also say, as a plea to those who are watching and those that have actually very kindly submitted questions, that any incidents of ASB has to be reported to the council. Putting it on social media, we can sometimes and quite often do actually miss them, which means that actually there's either a delay in dealing with it, or because if it's an incident that is time critical, we have actually effectively lost the window of time to actually deal with it effectively. So once again, I thank everyone who has actually taken the trouble to actually watch this live stream today. Thank you, Drew.
Yeah, thank you, May. That's great. And on that whole reported piece, and again, this is something that David and I have been talking about directly. There's a real opportunity for the council, through our transformation programme, to be to bringing forward much better ways of reporting it, and which is, thanks for that. That's great. And we're looking at app development as well. I know that's something that Dave's looking at in terms of what you're doing. We're now able to start really collaborating and working out how we can actually put those two things together. So we think we are going to get a whole system approach to improve it. Okay, brilliant. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for the questions. Massive thank you to Dave, Kelly and May, and really apologies to for our police colleagues who've been desperately trying to get in and have trouble with the technology. So my apologies to them. I think it's been a really useful session. We would love to hear and we get some good feedback about it being a useful session to do a deep dive. We can't do it all the time because there's a variety of general council questions we need to get to, and I think there's a really powerful way of engaging and challenging me in us doing that. But any ideas people have got for different sessions, different topics we'd like to do, I think the feedback on this has been great. So Dave, perhaps we could do this one again, in a period of time as well. So I'd like to come to that, but really welcome any ideas from anybody. Please fire them into us on what type of panel sessions. You've asked for an ASB session. We've done one. Please keep asking. Okay, we're over time. I do apologise to the quick questions we haven't answered as well, but hopefully there's been some really good interaction there. Thank you so much for everybody's time and input, and we look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks' time. Cheers. Bye-bye.